What's up guys, my name is Ace, and this week we got tons and tons of news relating to the Call of Duty franchise, and there's one last piece of news that came out a couple days ago that I did want to talk about in a video here, and this is the fact that apparently high-level employees at Activision have discussed moving away from the annual release schedule. Now this is coming from a Bloomberg report, which I will leave linked down below, but today we're just going to be talking about whether or not I feel that would be a good thing for the Call of Duty franchise. And I'll be honest with you, I have very mixed feelings about the idea of a 2-year Call of Duty cycle. A big part of me thinks this could be great for the franchise, and this would allow them to put a lot more time and effort into the development, and we'd at least likely be seeing a much better quality product. On the other hand, I think there would be some downsides to this as well, and also, I'm not even sure if this is 100% necessary based on history. So that's what this video is going to be about, kind of talking about both sides of the issues because I am being pulled in a couple different directions here when it comes to my opinion. So let's dive into my thoughts on this, and I wanted to start it off on the good side, the pros of making a move like this and taking Call of Duty away from annual releases and instead releasing a Call of Duty every 2 years. The first pro that seems immediately obvious is we would end up with a better quality product. At the very least, from a technical standpoint, we should be ending up with a better quality product. It'll give them a lot more time to work out bugs and get a lot of polish into the game, which is something that recent titles have really been lacking, especially Cold War and Vanguard. I feel like they've really lacked that polish at launch, and then it takes them basically the entire year in order to get to a point where you could call it reasonably polished. So at least in theory, if they made this move, when they launch a Call of Duty game, assuming they have that extra development time, we would be expecting that Call of Duty game to launch in a very polished state that we normally would take months to get to. And I think in a lot of ways that would be very refreshing, especially because we have this annual Call of Duty cycle. When the Call of Duty launches in a rough state and it takes 4 months out of its 12-month life cycle to get to a point where all of the primary issues have been worked out, that's pretty ridiculous. That's a quarter of the game's life cycle just working on the basic fundamental issues and bugs with the game. Next up for pros, by extending the development cycle, theoretically this should also give the developers more time to come out with truly unique ideas to really push the franchise forward. I think a lot of the times what we see with Call of Duty is either no innovation at all, so it can feel like a stale experience for many, or when they do try to bring in innovative ideas, it seems like those ideas weren't really well thought out, weren't properly tested, and maybe could have been great ideas if they were just iterated on a little bit, if they had a little more time to work out the issues and really polish those ideas up. In some ways, I feel like with this extra development time, this would allow Call of Duty to once again start setting trends and making big strides forward for the franchise, rather than coming up with half-baked ideas that are basically gimmicks that were clearly not very well thought out, that were just implemented in the game in order to add a selling point to the game so they can say they innovated with something. Next up, having Call of Duty on a 2-year cycle, this would actually make your cosmetics mean more, at least in my opinion, because they'd actually be lasting for more than just that 1 year. Now, I know Warzone does actually alleviate this a little bit. A lot of the cosmetics you earn in multiplayer, for instance, you can carry that over to Warzone, which is a multi-year sort of experience. So in that sense, your cosmetics already do technically mean more, assuming you actually play Warzone. But if we eliminate Warzone from the equation, maybe you're somebody that only plays multiplayer, the cosmetics you earn and buy within that year of Call of Duty, they're essentially meaningless the moment the next Call of Duty game launches. So making this move to a 2-year life cycle for a Call of Duty game, it would make it so those cosmetics stretch out a little bit longer, and therefore they would be a bit more attractive for people to be purchasing them. Now, from a business perspective, do I think this extra value in your cosmetics lasting longer would offset the loss in sales from an annual Call of Duty game? No, not even remotely close to that, which is one of the reasons that I'm still fairly doubtful that this is going to happen, although assuming that Microsoft deal goes through and they have new ownership, perhaps they want to shift their long-term goals with Call of Duty, and it may be worth the sacrifice in this area to make that happen. But finally, on my list of pros with having a 2-year Call of Duty life cycle, I think this would be potentially great for the competitive scene, assuming, of course, they're able to receive the appropriate support that apparently they have not been receiving for a while now. I still think it's crazy that COD pros have to learn an entirely new game every single year And I honestly feel it could be beneficial for the scene to have that 2 years of support with a Call of Duty game, so they could have a lot more events with each particular Call of Duty, and they could build more of that storyline throughout the course of a Call of Duty's life cycle, because with it switching up every single year, it seems like everything is just constantly changing, and nothing ever really settles in with Call of Duty competitive. Additionally, with the extra development time for each Call of Duty game, I assume that would mean that they'd actually be able to have a proper ranked playlist from day one of the Call of Duty's launch, rather than several months down the road once all of the initial hype for that Call of Duty game has died off. So there we go, those are a handful of pros that I pulled out here that I think could be very beneficial with Call of Duty moving into a 2-year life cycle. Now let's look at the other side of things. What are the potential downsides of making this move? Well, the first thing is mainly just a question I have. Do they really need this extra development time? With their current 3-year rotation where they have 3 different studios, each of them gets, theoretically, 3 years of development with their Call of Duty game, although one of those years is at least partially spent supporting the current game by part of the team. Shouldn't 3 years be enough, especially with a franchise like Call of Duty, where you're generally using the exact same code base and you've already got sort of that formula laid out for you? You just have to sort of iterate on that existing formula, and 3 years to do that should be enough, especially with the massive amount of resources that they have available to them. When you look back to the golden era of Call of Duty, they were on a 2-year development cycle. They were just swapping between Infinity Ward and Treyarch, and they didn't have all of these other support studios as well. They had some support studios, but not nearly the amount of resources that they've got currently. And yet those were the glory days of COD. They were able to consistently put out excellent products year after year. And I do get that games have become a lot more complex over time, but now they've shifted to the 3-year development cycle, and I do feel, at least from an outsider's perspective, 3 years could be enough, and it should be enough. However, the issue that we've been seeing with the past 2 Call of Duty games is really rough development cycles. Like Cold War, for instance, that wasn't even meant to be Treyarch's game. They had to step in partway through the development cycle of that game and just take over entirely, and they were under heavy pressure to develop that quickly. Also, with Black Ops 4, apparently they had to pull a full 180 like several months before the game launched. They had to start developing Blackout, and that was kind of a spur-of-the-moment thing that was just forced down on them from the higher-ups. And that apparently screwed their development cycle with that. And when we compare that to Modern Warfare 2019, which is generally regarded as a very polished, complete experience, even though I didn't like the gameplay aspect of that game, I do think it was a very polished game. It's one of the most polished games we've had in the Call of Duty franchise in a long time, and they managed to do that with a 3-year development cycle. So that goes to show that it can be done. It just seems like a lot of the times there's no wiggle room if there are any development issues, or if things are poorly managed, then there's a lot of issues that arise from that. So perhaps they just need to make some restructuring with how they manage the development of Call of Duty games, rather than making that switch to a 2-year life cycle. Next up on the reasons for me doubting that this would be a good move for Call of Duty is more development time doesn't necessarily mean better decisions. Like I said earlier, more development time will almost definitely lead to a better technical polish in the game, and also giving more time for development should give them time to better work out their ideas and iterate on those ideas. But what if the ideas are just flawed from the beginning? What if we end up with another situation like with Modern Warfare 2019, for instance? Like it or not, a lot of their game was designed around the decision to remove the minimap from core game modes. And that was a decision that immediately flopped with the community. That was something they had to change, I believe, after the first weekend of the beta of that game. And yet so many other elements of the game were designed with that change to the minimap in mind, and none of those ended up getting worked out over time. And this sort of leads me into the next concern that I have. What happens if we do end up with a Call of Duty game that doesn't land well with the community, or just a particular section of the community, and what if you fall in that section of the community? A great example of this for me is Modern Warfare 2019. I strongly dislike the general gameplay design philosophy of that game. I had very few issues with the game from a technical standpoint, I just didn't like their approach to designing the gameplay. And for you, it might be the same game, it might be Modern Warfare, or maybe it's a different game. Just picture a Call of Duty game launching with a 2-year life cycle, and from the moment it launches, you just straight up don't like that particular Call of Duty. With the current annual life cycle of Call of Duty games, if there is a flop of a game that just doesn't sit well with you, you at least know that in a year's time, another one's going to be coming out, and that one may take a slightly different approach that appeals much more to you and your section of the community. This is a big problem with the Call of Duty community. I use that term very loosely when I say Call of Duty community, because there are so many different sections of the Call of Duty community that want different things out of Call of Duty. And alienating certain sections of those community for multiple years may end up resulting in them losing interest in the franchise entirely and maybe taking that time to branch into different franchises and games, and they may end up falling in love with those, and now you've lost them as a Call of Duty fan. And I do think this is a problem that's fairly specific to the Call of Duty franchise because its fan base has become accustomed to and has been conditioned to expect a Call of Duty to release every single year. In many ways, Call of Duty players are even like the laughingstock of the gaming community because we are so impatient and we have that expectation of a new game every single year. And oftentimes, Call of Duty games don't really hold the attention of their players beyond about 6 months or so. By the time 6 months is up, we're already eagerly awaiting the next Call of Duty game and talking about leaks for that next Call of Duty game and rumors and what it's going to be, and the excitement starts building for that. What happens when that's a 2-year life cycle and people start to lose interest 6 months in? I think if they were to make this move, in order to counteract this, they would have to be extremely responsive to the community's wants with the game, and they'd have to be providing way more support than we currently see with Call of Duty titles. As a community, I think we would expect much bigger updates, much more content coming out with these updates, and a whole lot more each season compared to what we are currently seeing. And this leads me to another concern with a potential 2-year cycle for Call of Duty, and this is a concern that they would just stretch out that drip feed of content even more than we're currently seeing. Since they did make that transition into a bit more of a game-as-a-service style of a model with Call of Duty, it feels like many of the features that we expected day one with older Call of Duty games, they hold those features back and instead they slowly release them throughout the year. With Black Ops 1, for instance, we had all the party games available from day one throughout the entire life cycle of that game. Compare that to recent Call of Duty games, and we usually don't see any sort of party game modes until about 3 to 4 months into the game's life cycle. If they were to transition into a 2-year life cycle, does that mean they're now just going to stretch that out even longer in order to try and maintain that consistent attention span throughout the entire life cycle? In order to maintain that player engagement over time, they almost have to hold things back and hold things hostage so they can give those consistent spikes in engagement as time goes on throughout the year. And I worry that if they were to move into a 2-year life cycle, this drip feed would get even worse than we're currently seeing. And finally, this leads us to the last potential downside of a 2-year release cycle, and this is simply being able to react quickly to the trends in the industry. By extending out that development time, you have to sort of lock in what your next Call of Duty is going to be earlier than ever before. And trends can shift very quickly in this industry. So what if they've already had a Call of Duty game locked in and it's a World War II shooter, and they know full well that's not what the community is going to want, but it's too late because that World War II shooter has already had 2 years of development. So they can't just scrap all of that without completely defeating the purpose of extending out this development cycle. So now they're sort of committed to releasing this thing that they know no longer fits with the industry trend. I think this is just one last thing that is worth considering when you think about extending out that development time. So there we have it. That's sort of my list of pros and cons when it comes to this. And honestly, I'm still really torn when it comes to the thought of a 2-year Call of Duty cycle. I think in many ways it could be amazing. But I also feel there's no guarantee that it will significantly improve the quality of the products that they're coming out with. And I worry that it could have some potential negative side effects as well. So I'm not necessarily completely opposed to the idea of a 2-year cycle, but I'm also not fully on board with it at this point. I just have these mixed feelings, and this is where I want to hear from you guys in the comment section below. What do you think about the idea of Call of Duty moving into a 2-year life cycle for their games rather than a 1-year life cycle? Just let me know those thoughts down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.